We've all dealt with first-line managers. What is a first-line manager? Well, it is someone who operates real-time, dealing with customers, dealing with employees. They usually have an individual or many individuals, possibly a team or two, that they are responsible for to motivate and inspire to reach company goals. Examples of first-line managers would be your ward nurse, someone who has a group of nurses that they inspire, manage, and assign roles and responsibilities. Certainly a sergeant in the armed forces. And then you have the title of supervisor. Supervisors, again, have one or many individuals, one or several teams that they work with to reach the organizational goals.
Let's break it up into two parts, first line and manager. So manager is, in the organizational context, has been a very highly used, almost an overused term. So, organizations have used manager to connote hierarchy rather than the actual content of the job. So for example, you could have an assistant manager at the, doing a job, you could have a senior manager, or you could have a manager. So many organizations have tended to use the term manager to define hierarchy within the organization. Whereas if you take a more universal approach, a manager is somebody who gets work done of some sort, right? And again, in a universal connotation, a manager is one who gets the work done through the help of other people in the organization. So the most common, lowest common denominator as a definition for term manager would be a person who gets work done in the organizational context with the help of other people. So that's how I would define a manager in an organizational context. Now, if you add first line to it, a first line manager is a person, like we've just discussed, who gets work done with the help of people who are at the front line. The worker bees, as we call them in the organization, and the guys who the organization relies upon for collecting and generating most of the revenue streams. So a first line manager is a guy who sits on top of the first line of resources within the organization. That's how I would define a first line manager.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. See, what happens is that, typically in many industries, the first line of resources are the ones which the company uses for generating revenue. So that's of immediate importance for the company. So they focus a lot on training the people who are at the front line, right? But as you keep moving from the front line to becoming a front line or a first line manager, then the immediacy of generating those revenues starts going down, while you're still playing a very important role, because now instead of being an individual worker who generates revenue on the basis of your own capability, once you move to a first line manager's role, you're now actually generating revenue with the help of probably 10 resources or 20 resources. So your role is very important. But since you yourself are not generating any revenue for the business often tends to treat first line managers as people who can wait to learn or who should learn on their own, right? But at the same time, we must understand that for the company, it's probably a more important role, because he's now responsible. He could make or mar the revenue generation from 10 resources, right? So that is why, in my view, training and ensuring that first line managers are competent and capable is probably even more important than training of the front line resources. So in that context, a front line manager or a first line manager is one who could really make or mar the business.
Sales manager. It's the key lever. That person is the key for driving sales culture, for multiplying themselves into people, for changing performance. And what drives me crazy is that so few sales managers are spending their time on the highest value activities. That's such a big deal.
I totally agree with you in terms of the frontline sales manager is the core to any sales organization, right? They spend the time and do the coaching and development of their sales teams and really have to ensure that they're driving the performance for the entire organization.
And that's really where we get the scale within an organization to go drive business results, is at the frontline managers, and making sure that we're putting the right processes in place to support them, to make them and help them achieve the results for the organization, and really drive the talent to deliver the results at the field level.
Well, that's a huge point, because there's a lot of sales managers that run around and they kind of play the hero. and they're trying to do everybody's job, and they're not multiplying themselves or mentoring, into their people. And that's why I'm so excited about what we're doing here.
Right.
Is opposed to just running in and just doing some training to, say we train the salespeople. We're dealing with sales culture, and we're trying to create this environment.
And I think you brought out a really great point around our sales culture, right? Because, really ensuring that our frontline managers are able to help our teams gain that scale doesn't happen by them trying to jump in and solve every scenario. We need them to grow and develop superheroes, but that means they need to do the discipline and do all the activities to help develop and coach their teams to be able to really be a superhero themselves.
So you and I talk about this a lot, where sales managers are getting trapped
Right.
in either low value stuff or they don't delegate, and it keeps them from doing the things that really move the needle, from one-on-one accountability, from one-on-one coaching, from getting in the field to go work with someone in a proactive way, where it's really more about the person development than it is trying to move the ball forward with that particular.
If you think about sales managers, it's no different than sports. These are truly sales athletes, and although sometimes the talent and the capabilities that you need in building up a professional athlete, sometimes it comes natural to people, and sometimes you have to build it up. But the best sports athletes, as we see in today's culture, are not always the best coaches.
Yeah, well, that's a fact, especially in sales, right? That's
Yes.
a big transition where when you're really good at selling, you're selfish. You own your time, you worry about your accounts, your results. When you make that transition to management, you've got to subdue your ego, and you have to realize it's not about you, it's about your team, and you win through your people. And the managers that don't get that, they cheat themselves out of the joy of seeing people get developed.
I completely agree. And it's always something that, we're challenged with as we grow and develop our sales managers, right? That you don't always just look for the superhero sales athlete as they've been early on in their career, because it doesn't necessarily mean they have those capabilities or the DNA to actually go and coach and mentor a team. Right, and so they have different characteristics.
And we're tackling that, right? Where you have managers that are trying to do everything, it doesn't work. We need them building themselves into people. That's where the fun and the joy comes from. And plus, that's when you really see transformative results, because there's a lot of change taking place.
Right. And we need to see the scale, right? We don't gain scale in our business if they can't help coach people up.
One of the